very special guests here with me today, Matt Damon and Gary White. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to give you a personal anecdote. Just before I was coming to Davos, and I told my colleagues at work, and I said, I have a session with Matt Damon and Gary White, and suddenly my cool quotient went up because I was talking to Matt Damon. But I think there's a story there as well. I think we do need people who have your kind of influence to talk about these issues, because otherwise, like climate change wasn't an issue a couple of years ago, water, health, education are issues that are not given the kind of priority that they ought to. Is that what makes this sort of critical for you to put your weight behind it as well? That the world needs to address this issue?
Certainly. But as I started to look at issues of extreme poverty, as I wanted to get involved, a little over 10 years ago, I was just shocked by how water underpinned everything. And just the magnitude of the crisis and just the senseless, needless death and not to mention leaving aside the fact that like every 90 seconds a kid is dying because they lack access to clean water and sanitation, which is something that's very hard for a Westerner to relate to at all. The life outcomes of women and girls who are spending their entire lives scavenging for water, even if they do survive, they're doing it at the expense of their own education. The outcome they can expect in their life is severely affected by the fact that they lack access to clean water and sanitation. And so just the scale and the magnitude of the crisis really shocked me and made me want to learn more.
Gary, you've been doing this for 25 years now. Mm-hmm. What has changed over the last 25 years? The way that governments approach this problem, the way that the social sector approaches this problem, the way that the corporate sector approaches the problem. What's been the big shift that you've seen? Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the shift that we've seen, that we've acted on, and I think this gets to the point of what the insight is here, and that is that this problem actually kind of contains its own solution. The fact that the poor are already paying so much for water, 7 to 10 times more per liter than the middle class in some of the urban slums around the world. And the fact that they're going to loan sharks to take out loans to build toilets. And so you start to look at this issue in a very different way, at least we did, and that is that, what if instead of accepting the conventional wisdom that we have to raise all charity in order to solve this global crisis, what if we could look more at providing capital and getting affordable capital into the hands of the poor so that they can get the water and sanitation solutions that they need? And that's what we've done with water credits. We had that insight and we acted on it. And now we've created a network of more than 65 microfinance institutions, 65 microfinance institutions around the world who are providing loans for water and sanitation. Now more than 5.5 million people have gained access to water and toilets by getting a loan instead of waiting for charity that might not ever come.
Mm-hmm. But you just spoke about how this problem is solvable. Give us a sense of the math, give us a sense of the numbers, because according to the WHO, it requires about $200 billion a year. Yeah. And how much have you been able to raise through water credit so far?
Well, I think it's important to look at $200 billion a year versus the $8 billion that's currently going in for all aid and development assistance. And you can see that disparity and how we're never going to get there with charity. What we've done is taken philanthropic capital, about 17 million so far, to kind of jumpstart this market at the base of the pyramid, correct the market failure so that microfinance institutions can respond. So that 17 million has leveraged now 220 million in private capital to come in and scale this up. So that's really what we're looking at, and we need to scale it further. And at the macro level, I've been on the Water Global Agenda Council for WEF, and we're about to publish a report. Some of the preliminary findings show that it would take about, well, first of all, the coping costs that the poor have now of buying packaged water that's been treated, the coping cost of the health issues related to this, both in terms of the direct medical cost as well as the cost of being sick and not working, premature death. All of these come up to about $678 billion a year. But on the other hand, we also calculated what it would cost to get water in every household 24/7, sanitation, proper wastewater treatment. It's about $678 billion. So it's like for $4 billion, we could find our way out of this. And that's what I meant by the problem contains its own solution.
Mm-hmm. So Matt, while you were speaking with investors, trying to convince them that this was an idea to bet on, this was an idea that has the potential to scale, what was the big challenge there?
Well, I think Gary's being a little humble. I think the first insight that he had was by spending his adult life in a lot of these communities, that realization that these extremely poor people were paying for their water was a big epiphany. So he had this theory that if he could just nudge the market towards them, that they could become paying customers, and they could viably pay back a loan. And so it was a theory, and it's worked really better than we could have ever hoped. I mean, these loans go out and they pay back at over 99%. And what that means is, so the concept of water credit was, okay, if you live in a urban or peri-urban area, a slum, and you're in a slum in India, the municipality is piping water right under your feet, but you're not connected to it, right? You don't have a tap in your home. So you, as the woman of, the matriarch of the family, you're taking time away from your job to go to some pre-designated water collection point and stand in line for, however many hours to fill up your jerry can. This is obviously incredibly unproductive. So what Gary thought was, well, this isn't a classic kind of Muhammad Yunus model of an income-generating loan. It's not like I'm buying you're loaning me money, I'm buying a sewing machine, and I'm going to have a sewing business and pay the loan back. But it's actually an income-enhancing loan, right? Because what you're actually doing is you're buying somebody's time back. They no longer have to go. If you can front them the money for the connection to the existing infrastructure, they no longer have to leave their job and spend hours waiting in line. They're going to have a tap in their house. And so you're going to buy that time back for them. And essentially what that's going to do is allow them to pay this loan off and pay it off relatively quickly. I mean, these loans, they're taken out over an 18 months to 2 year period, but oftentimes people pay them off early and immediately take out a loan to put a toilet in their house, because they've got this new income from this time that they've got back. So it started as this theory, as kind of Gary just looked at it and said, this really should work. And over this last number of years, it's proven to work even really as well as we ever could have hoped. And the thing about these loans paying back at 99% and above is that money just gets recycled and goes back out again. So what you're really doing is in a kind of classic direct impact situation where you're digging a well, it'll cost, say, $25 to bring somebody clean water for life. Well, with this model, because the money keeps going out and coming back and going out and coming back, in our most mature loan programs in India, we're down below $5 per person to bring them clean water for life. So you're really bringing down the philanthropic cost of capital per person, and that is what makes it sustainable and it makes it scalable.
So since you talked about India, Gary, let me ask you about the India example. Maybe that'll help us understand how the water credit model works better. Is it correct that you target largely women as far as these loans are concerned? Because the delinquency ratio is significantly low, and you're almost at 99%.
Exactly, and we do, because that's our partners, right? We work through local microfinance institutions to get this done. And I think, an example that kind of brings it home is a woman I met in Bangalore. She was paying for her family 20 rupees every day for their water supply, and she was paying 20 rupees so they could go use the toilet in their slum. And so, every day, 40 rupees, 1,200 rupees a month that she was paying, and these are those coping costs I was getting to before. And so she took out a loan for a toilet and for a water connection, and her combined monthly payments on that loan for 18 months was 1,200 rupees. So it's exactly the same amount each month that's being expended, but she would have been trapped forever paying the 1,200 under the current system, but this access to a loan allowed her to pay that connection fee to the water utility and get the toilet built. I think that really summarizes this concept of, and Matt said it a long time ago, it's really expensive to be poor. And that's what we're helping people to do, to buy their way out of this endless cycle of going and paying for this or going to loan sharks. Another woman I met was paying 125% interest on a loan so she could build a toilet. So that's what we're trying to tap into, trying to correct this market failure, basically.
You know, as you correct this market failure and as you try and scale things up, Matt, what is the role that you see of governments and the way that you can partner with governments to take this forward? For instance, in India, the government has launched a Swachh Bharat campaign, which is essentially, to build toilets and sanitation and so on and so forth. How do you see the role of government in this context?
Well, I mean, that really helps put the wind at our back, actually, that the Swachh Bharat mission. But look, I mean, you really need both. You need both working together. I mean, ours is very much a bottom-up approach, but you need that top-down services. You need governments providing the infrastructure, for people to tap into. So there's a really important role for everybody to play. But I think but nobody's at cross purposes. I think we're hopefully what we've been able to do is really prove this market, prove that there are these people at the base of the economic period who should have value as customers, and can pay that water tariff and pay it regularly and participate that way. But and then there's also the issues of, well, I mean, you tell about the RBI and.
Well, yeah, I mean, Matt and I have had some good meetings with the Reserve Bank of India and talking about this model to offer up our experience. And one of the things that we talked about was the priority sector lending in India and how can we support getting priority sector for water and sanitation, and talking through that. And that, I'm happy to say that policy has been modified so that water and sanitation do fall under the priority sector. How can we get it into an approved vehicle for the CSR mandate that's now in India, and bringing again our experience, and we're there just to support. I mean, this is a priority for India and for a lot of countries around the world, and we just want to share our experience and have that factor in however the governments think that can help them.
So it's working in India, at least the government is being responsive to the ideas that you're putting on the table. What is the experience in other developing markets that Water.org is working in at this point in time? Do you see a similar sort of agility, similar responsiveness from the governments that you're working with?
Yeah, we do. And, we're working in about 12 countries around the world. And, there's obviously a little bit of healthy skepticism at first, right? We're this international NGO, and we have this kind of unconventional concept of water credit.
What are they sort of confused about, or what are they skeptical of?
Well, a lot of it is just that, we kind of come under the radar. As Matt said, we're more bottom up than top down. And so we don't kind of go in and kind of try to meet with the head minister of water or anything like that and draw attention to ourselves. What we like to do is to kind of quietly go about helping the poor get access, and what are the roadblocks that are keeping them from getting access, and we start there. We always start with the poor and see what is the roadblock, and then we help remove those roadblocks. And we find that access to affordable finance is the number one roadblock in most countries. And as we start to unpack that and develop solutions that are specific to those countries, then we can share our success and share our evidence base, because that's what we find governments and funders and everybody responds to best, is that we don't just have a theory, we went out and built the evidence base.
That was what was really interesting in India a couple of years ago, that our MFI partners, we asked them to identify the bottlenecks, and with all of them reported back access to affordable capital. I mean, it was, they said the market is, the need is there, the appetite for these things is there. And in fact, the Gates Foundation conducted this study, and they've determined that with solutions like this, like water credit, there are 565 million people who could participate in solutions like that. So that's a big number. If you have 660 million people who lack access to clean water and 2.4 billion who lack access to adequate sanitation, 565 million that's a healthy chunk of that can be reached with these kind of market forces, just as long as you just give the market a little nudge towards them.